Hi there. Welcome to another episode of RestorationCast. This season we're talking about in the Bible and all of these different strange Bible stories that we kind of look at and say, well, what in the world is that doing in there? This evening we're going to be talking about Ruth, and there's a weird part at the end of the book of Ruth where Boaz is going and he's supposed to marry Ruth momentarily, essentially. And before he can do that, he has to go and talk to this other kinsman redeemer that Ruth has. And what they do is they trade sandals, and it's a really weird thing because who does that? So anyway, that's what we're talking about this evening on this episode of Restoration Cast. You might notice that I am by myself, and there's a whole story to that. But basically what happened was my brother, Bryson, he was over here earlier watching the Tennessee Titans football game with my dad, and the Titans are really bad this season. I watched most of the game with them, and by the time they left, which was right after halftime, the Titans were down. I think they were playing Arizona, the Cardinals, and they were down 21-6. And so my dad and my brother, they both leave. My dad drives my brother back to Jonesboro, which is about 45 minutes from here, back to his house. And then he was supposed to come back and join the podcast. And apparently on their way to Jonesboro, the Titans start winning. Or winning might be a strong word. They start turning things around, and eventually they do manage to win. So if you're planning on watching that game, then I just spoiled it for you. But somehow that has something to do with the reason my dad is late. But if you notice, he just walked in.
I don't know if my hair is even good or not. Oh, man.
You got a lapel mic laying there on your Bible.
What do I do with it?
You put it on your shirt. You lapel it, yeah. You can turn. Yeah, you can do it like that. Also, as a side note, we are using little lapel mics that we just bought, and so let us know how the audio is. If it's really quiet, then you might tell us, hey, your lapels are not working. And if it works really well, then you can tell us, hey, your lapels are working really well. And if you don't say anything, then we'll just assume that that means they're working really well.
Yeah. We also turned off the air conditioner.
Yes, we did.
Getting a little stuffy in here.
Well,
it'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm wearing shorts.
You didn't have to tell them. See, they can't see from the bottom down. They don't.
That's true. They don't. But now they know.
Sometimes on Sunday nights I come in and I'm wearing my pajama pants. Well, you said shorts. I thought
they really didn't need to know that.
They didn't need to know that. Tonight we're talking about sneakers.
Something like that.
In the Bible? Were they Nikes? Adidas? Converse?
These ones are Converse.
Yeah.
The ones we're talking about in the Bible were sandals. They were not sneakers. So I don't know what brand they were.
What brand of sandals? I've never really been into sandals, so it doesn't really matter.
I think, what is it? Is it Lululemon that's the big new sandals recently?
Lululemon?
Or, yeah, I can't remember. Those are either sandals or they're pants. Or maybe both.
I can tell you're really up on this. With a name like Lululemons.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe they were Crocs.
They would sell, though, just for the name. Anyhow, I'm here. I called him. I said, I'm on my way, man. I'm coming in hot. So you were supposed to cover for me. Did you cover?
Well, I told them the story.
Yeah.
Of
we won.
Why you were late.
The Tennessee Titans have finally won a game this season. Bryson and I bond over football. Gabriel and I bond over In the Bible? I get to spend a lot more time with Bryce. I can't keep you straight. Well, you're Gabriel.
Yes.
I get to spend more time with Gabriel because he's in college and all, and we do Bible study together. He's partner in my ministry, all of that stuff. And so I see him a lot. I only get to see Bryson on Sundays. And during football season, we always, after we have home church, we try to take in a football game. Have you already told him this?
I don't think I told him that part.
Well, the football game kind of went long, and I had to take him home because they're down to one vehicle. You don't need to know why. It's just a crazy life. And so I had to take him home. But when we pulled in the driveway, the Titans were just in the thick of it.
And that's what made you late.
Yeah, I gave him a fist bump and everything. I mean, it's like a mano y mano moment. Mano? Manna? Anyhow, it was good. But we could talk about your sandals, although I'm curious as to why you didn't put sandals up there.
Because I didn't want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's your show. Hey, somebody out there comment. Tell me how my mic's doing. Am I doing good?
So these are the questions that
Right
our SBS students need to answer?
Answer all of them.
Yeah.
We support 5 missionaries. We have a lot of students around the world, but we support 5 missionaries. And if they are supported by us on a monthly basis, they are required to watch this, answer the questions, all of those kind of things. So we interact with our missionaries at least 2 or 3 times a week, which is kind of cool. I think it's a good accountability thing. Anyhow, but that's what this is about. If you're just a regular student, just taking it for the fun of it, and learning and all those kind of things, then you need to do it too because you'll grow.
Yeah. So there's your questions that you can
right
answer
there.
now.
What are we even talking about? Sandals. I don't even get it.
We're talking about Ruth.
Oh, we're doing Ruth. I like Ruth.
Yes. I think we talk about Ruth at least once every semester.
Well,
So
she's
this
such a
is-
good one,
This is the obligatory Ruth lesson
Yeah.
for this season. So the story of Ruth. I tried to explain the story of Ruth to Judah. At
9
lunch.
years old.
Yeah, we were sitting there at the lunch table, and he desperately wanted to help me with my PowerPoint. And I said, okay, do you know what a PowerPoint is? And he didn't know what a PowerPoint was, so I told him what a PowerPoint is. And, which was actually very hard to explain. I ended up just showing him.
I thought about it. It would be.
So then he was like, okay, well, what are you doing your PowerPoint about? And I was like, Ruth. And he was like, who's Ruth?
Who's Ruth?
And I was like, she's from the Bible.
She's like in the book.
And he was like, well, why don't you explain the story of Ruth to me, and then I can help you put your slideshow together. And so I started. And I said, well, there was this lady named Naomi, and she lived in Israel. You know where Israel is. So then I explained where Israel is. And then I was like, so she moved from Israel to this other place called Moab. And we're not going to talk about where that is because it's not important. But suffice it to say, she moved. And her son got married to this lady named Ruth. And that was about where I lost him.
Not interested no more, Uncle. He calls him Uncle.
Yeah.
Moving on to other things.
Yep.
So he didn't help you with your PowerPoint?
He did not help me with my PowerPoint. Anyway, so Naomi, she moves from Bethlehem in Israel to the land of Moab.
Which is basically to the right. If you're
Yes.
looking at the map, go right.
Yeah. And her 2 sons get married to 2 Moabite girls, and then they die, as Naomi's husband dies. And
3 of them bit the dust. They're gone.
yeah, it's not really clear how, how close together they died.
Yeah, that's
but,
true. But all
they
3
all,
men,
all died.
one would think, oh dear, is it in the water?
Yeah. And so Naomi decided she's going to go back home to Bethlehem because
Go home.
she's heard that God has come and he's blessed the people there.
Which is back to the left.
Yeah, she's going to go left. And
That would be west.
and so she says, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. I'm going to go left. And you guys, you just stay here, go back to your families, and maybe you'll find somebody else to marry.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have had it hard. I mean, Both of you lost your hubbies.
Yes. And one of her daughter-in-laws?
How do you pluralize daughter-in-law?
I don't know.
Is it daughters-in-law or daughter-in-laws? Or maybe it's daughter-ins-law.
Daughter-ins-law.
Where do you put the S?
Anyway, one of them, Orpah, decides.
I don't know why I find that. You need to name your daughter Orpah.
Yeah.
She will never get married.
She decides she's gonna go home and gonna listen to Naomi, and so she goes back to her parents, and then Ruth, the other daughter-in-law, says, "There's no way I'm doing that.
No.
Right? You're my family," and she makes a promise to Naomi right there that she's going to live with her for the rest of their lives. In fact, bury me in the same place where Naomi.
It actually says that.
Right.
Are you going to bring up that your
Yeah,
mom and I?
yeah, I guess. I don't know about that, but we're going to talk about that passage later on.
Okay, I'll wait till then.
So in the meantime, Ruth and Naomi, they go back and they live in Bethlehem to the left.
Which is also the city of David.
Yes.
Not yet the city of Jesus, but one day will be.
Yeah, it's not yet the city of David either.
I hadn't thought about that. You're right. That's true. It's not even.
Yeah. And so they go back to Bethlehem, and Ruth goes about taking care of Naomi.
That was nice of her.
Yes. And so she goes and she's gleaning grain out of the field, and she happens to be in the field of this guy named Boaz.
Good guy.
And Boaz takes notice of Ruth. And so Ruth, she goes back and tells Naomi about it. And Naomi's like, "Oh, that's good, because Boaz is one of our kinsman redeemers."
This could work out, dear.
So she basically says, "You need to go back and you need to propose to that guy." And Ruth does. And Boaz says...
In the Bible?
And Boaz says, "Yes, that's what we should have talked about instead
We
of
should
Santa's
have
thing."
women proposing to men in such an odd fashion.
Yes.
Are we going to deal with that at all?
Not really.
I mean, that's weird.
Yeah, it's...
Laying at his feet, and what's with that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can, maybe some other day, people. You can read the book for yourself. It's not a long book. It's like, what, 5 chapters?
4.
Oh. 4.
Yeah. So Boaz basically says yes, but then he says, "There is a redeemer that's closer than I am, and so I need to go get his permission," basically.
It was more of a, oh yes. I mean, you kind of pick up on that if you read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
He really wants this to happen. I think the whole time he's praying against this other dude.
Probably.
So the other dude is like closer as far as family rankage?
Yes,
Okay.
something like that. He's a closer relative.
Closer relative.
Yeah. And so this section we're talking about tonight is basically the story of how Boaz gets that guy to agree to let him marry Ruth.
No, it's how Boaz gets that guy to agree to swap sandals.
That too.
It's weird.
Yes.
It's such a weird story.
So, Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 through 12.
Thanks for having my Bible open
You're
to
welcome.
Ruth 4. I really was flying in here, and you had it ready to go.
You're welcome.
I'm with you now.
It says, "Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz said, 'Turn aside, friend, sit down here.' And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, 'Naomi has come back from the country of Moab.' Who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not tell me, that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it, and I come after you.' And he said, 'I will redeem it.'"
Are you going to pause there?
For dramatic effect.
Yeah. I think at this point he's thinking, oh boy,
Oh man,
this is good.
I shouldn't have done this.
I got land coming.
Oh, you're talking about the Redeemer.
The Redeemer.
I thought you meant Boaz.
Oh,
And
no.
he's like, this guy's agreeing to it.
I mean, he does. I really think Boaz wants the deal. I think he wants to marry Ruth, but I think he's also being very fair about it, and he's trying not to put any spin on it, which would have been really hard for me. And the guy jumps at it.
Yeah.
But not for long.
No. So verse 5. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance.
And the man says, oh, that changes things. Go ahead.
Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself. I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in the former times in Israel concerning the redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belongs to Elimelech and all that belonged to Kilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. All right, so that's the story. Now we look at the problems that I have with this story. Number one is, why does Boaz go up into the gate in order to find this kinsman redeemer? I mean, I guess that's as good a place as any to find him, but typically if I were looking for somebody, especially if this is pre-cell phones,
yes.
I think I would say, oh, he's probably at his house. I'll just go there and knock on the front door and find him.
It's not like Bethlehem was a major booming metropolis.
Yeah.
He probably knew where this guy lives.
Yes. And so you kind of say, why would you have to wait there at the city gate to say, maybe this guy's coming into town today and I'll see him.
I just hang out here by the gate hoping he'll come.
Yeah. That seems to directly contrast with what Naomi says about Boaz earlier. The end of chapter 3, Ruth is telling Naomi about this deal that she struck up with Boaz and everything. And Naomi's like, oh, that's good. And then ends by saying, the man's not going to wait on this thing, right? He's going to get it done today. Which I always thought was a cool thing to say about it. But it kind of sounds like maybe Boaz is, he's not working too hard to get this thing done. Let's just wait around and see if the Redeemer shows up.
We're just going to hang out by the gate. Maybe today he went for groceries.
Yep. Number 2 is, why does Boaz feel the need to talk to the other Redeemer before marrying Ruth at all? Right? It's not something that we do.
Yeah. Even today when you go and you talk to the dad, it's kind of honorary. It's, I think most folks probably don't even ask. I did. Oh, that was the story. I could tell you that story, but you don't care. I did. I went and Cindy's dad, I walked right on in there and I said it. And he didn't respond for a long time, which made me feel very uncomfortable. Finally, he said, yes, but you be sure to take care of her. Carlton's a man of very few words, but I have taken care of her, by the way. But you're right. Even today, it's just kind of an honorary thing. But it seems like at this point, he's not only kind of going through the legal process, he's calling through to have witnesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, and you kind of have the idea that as it's an honorary thing today, there's not really any legal binding to it or anything.
Yeah.
You know, that you can ask the dad, but then even if he says no, you can kind of just go ahead
and many
and
couples
do it anyway. Yeah.
Probably not wise, but they do.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas there does seem to be some kind of legal ramification to the whole thing with Boaz.
Yeah.
That there's a good reason for him to ask this guy, probably other than just I want to be respectful.
Yeah.
And for that same idea, there's kind of the idea that if this guy says, "Yeah, I want to marry Ruth instead of you," then that would be binding, and Boaz wouldn't really have much recourse. Can't just say, "Well,
yeah,
Ruth would rather marry me, so I guess you're wrong."
She doesn't even like you.
She doesn't know who you are.
But you're right. But at that day, I'm going to open that up because it's getting warm in here. The woman didn't have a whole lot of say in the matter, so it doesn't matter whether she liked him or not, kind of a thing. And maybe you're going to mention this, but clearly with what you read, we've also got the legal not exchange, but a legal claiming of property that's going on.
Yeah, really, what you see going on here is Boaz essentially says, "I'm going to go to bat for you, regardless of how it ends for me," right? And so. He goes to this other redeemer and says, the important thing here is that Naomi and Ruth get taken care of, and so as much as I would like to marry Ruth, I'm gonna make sure that they get taken care of, right? And so
I like Boaz.
The deal here is somebody's got to marry Ruth, and you can be the guy, but if you don't, I'm gonna do it.
Doesn't sound like he wants to do it.
No.
I mean, it almost sounds immediate. It kind of says it. At this, the kinsman redeemer says. So it's like, oh, hold it. You just brought up marrying this other woman. No, I like the whole idea of getting extra land, but when you bring another woman in, no, not you take it.
Yeah. And then the third problem here is what does trading sandals have to do with anything?
I'm anxious to get there because I'm telling you, nobody wants my stinky shoe. And you're only getting one.
Yeah. Yeah, do they all wear the same size sandal?
Yeah, what's with that? What if Boaz had little feet? And the other guy's a big brute?
Yeah, they kind of limp away.
I guess the guy ties it around his big toe and he just kind of walks barefoot home.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, dear. You're silly. Go on. Explain it all to us.
All right.
I'm just here for the fun of it.
So problem number 1. Which was
what was it?
Why is this all taking place in the gate?
Why go to the gate? That's right. Why go to the gate? Why not just pick up the phone and give him a call? Oh, well, we know that one. Why not just go to his house?
Yeah. And the idea we kind of hit on already, but the idea is that this process has some legal ramifications, and the city gate would have been the place to go for that.
Which again seems a little odd.
Yeah, it does, but there's various mentions of the city gates throughout Scripture, and the idea always seems to be this is where the elders go, right? And they, you got some kind of important decision you're making. You need wisdom. You need witnesses for something, as is going on in this story. You go to the city gate because that's where the important people are.
Yeah.
Basically, so it's kind of like, today you go to the courthouse.
Right.
Or City Hall or something along those lines. That's the gate in this time period. And so that's kind of the idea of what's going on is Boaz recognizes there's some kind of legal proceeding that we need to do. And so he goes to the city gate. The other thing is I think this kind of shows the standing that both Boaz and this other redeemer probably have in the area. That at least Boaz can just go to the city gate and expect this other guy's going to be there.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's kind of the idea that these probably are two respected individuals who you would expect to be, at the city gate holding court, and that idea.
Yeah.
This is a little bit like a combination between City Hall or the courthouse and whenever you go to a gas station early in the morning and there's all the old guys drinking coffee.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the idea.
I agree.
This is just kind of where they hang out.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
Then people will come through the city gate and they'll ask for advice
Right.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of traffic. I mean, you go to Acts 3, you got the lame man sitting at the gate begging for money. Obviously this is where you would have to pass through here to get into town. So there's probably commerce going on here. It's a place of populace. That's where folks are going to be. And I like your illustration of the gas station. We got one just 3 miles down the road here, and that's the way it is. Every once in a while, I go in there, and there's a bunch of old guys sitting around. They're all farmers, talking about when's it going to rain, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think you're right, and it even talks about the elders here. Clearly, elders has a double meaning. I think in most contexts, it's not just that they're leaders; it's they're old. I mean, that's what elder means. You're old.
Yeah.
And so this is where you go to get wisdom as well, I suspect.
Yeah, and that also kind of shows a little bit of the difference between their culture and ours. Obviously, the idea that the city gate is where you go for legal advice is a little bit that's different than what we have. But also the idea that the leaders of the city aren't necessarily the most qualified guys, rather they're the old guys, right? They're the well-respected older gentlemen that are sitting there having their coffee or whatever.
They probably could drink coffee.
I don't think coffee.
It wasn't invented yet?
Well, it was invented, but I think it's a South American thing.
Oh, it's South American.
And so it hadn't been discovered by...
maybe hot chocolate.
I could be wrong.
Tea.
They grow a lot of coffee in Brazil, I know.
It wasn't Coke or Sprite or
anything. Yeah. But you kind of have this idea that the way we treat elderly people in our culture...
Totally different.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
Right.
And so we kind of have these gatherings of elderly people that, they sip their coffee and they're gathered in the gas station and they're largely ignored.
Yeah, there's no young people. They're not surrounded by young people asking for advice.
And so they're all there, together, surrounding with, like-minded people, and they all, talk about when's it going to rain next and that kind of thing. And there's nobody that's going and saying, I need some advice on this particular topic. And, all of this wisdom that is gathered in this one place, could you guys give me some advice about this?
Right.
And it just shows the difference between our two cultures.
And a huge flaw in our culture, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, just let's say that half of them didn't really live that great of a life. Okay, but they have lived their life. They've already been down that road. Imagine how our culture would change if instead of our kids picking up their phone and Googling it, they said, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up early and go down to the gas station and talk to those old men. I bet they've been through that. I wonder what they would say. Imagine how our culture would change.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of what you see with this idea of the city gate. And you see this again in Job chapter 29. So this is Job talking and lamenting his life and all the bad things that have happened to him. And he's kind of looking back on where he used to be in life. And he talks about going to the city gate.
Oh, yeah?
So Job chapter 29, verses 1 through 12. And Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through the darkness, as I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter," whatever that means, "and the rock..."
We might deal with that next week.
"The rock poured out for me streams of oil. Then I went out to the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square. The young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hand on their mouth. The voices of the nobles was hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard it, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw it, it approved, because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. So Job basically says, I was this really wise guy who, everybody wanted my advice. And so whenever I would go into the city gate and sit down, the people that didn't really belong there, the young people, that they don't really have this level of wisdom, and they kind of get up and leave because they're making room for me. And, the old people stand up out of respect, and everybody kind of hushes, and they listen. This is what Job has to say. We gotta pay attention to whatever he's gonna say. And so you kind of get this idea that the city gate is really this place for these highly respected people, that they go there and they have good advice to give to people. And that's really kind of part of what's going on here with this idea is Boaz, he wants this legal aspect to things. He wants basically to go in and get this transaction notarized or something along those lines.
Good word.
And so he goes to the city gate and he says, you guys are the most trustworthy people in town, basically. And so can you all be the witnesses for this transaction? And that's basically what's going on. Is the city gate is the place where these wise people would go, and they just kind of hang out there.
Yeah. And if you allow me to expand the context, which doesn't really have a lot to do with what we're talking about, but if we'll go back to the story of Lot, and we find Lot sitting in the city gate, it begins to expand the cultural context a little bit. In other words, Lot had not just moved toward a very pagan, wicked city. Remember, he's got the choice between the mountainous land or the valley, and he chooses the valley because it's well watered, etc. Well, that's where Sodom's at. And so Uncle Abraham, he's up in the mountains. Lot pitches his tent towards Sodom, and then the next reference you have is, now he's not living in a tent no more. He moved in town, and he's sitting in the city gate, meaning that if you keep the context alive, or the culture alive, like you're trying to do in this series, you begin to recognize that Lot has begun taking a real level of personal interaction with the way things happen in Sodom. And we know a lot of bad stuff happens in Sodom.
Yeah, and I think that kind of colors part of the discussion about Christians and politics. That's basically what Lot is, right? Is he's decided, I'm going to run for office or whatever. I'm going to, act politically by being one of these wise old sages that sits in the gate.
Right.
And so essentially what happens is Lot enters this very corrupt political system of Sodom, and I think probably he goes into it thinking this is a corrupt system, but I can change it.
I think so. I think Scripture indicates that.
It's not necessarily that it changes Lot, because it doesn't seem to really affect Lot that much, but Lot clearly doesn't have any effect, right? And it changes his family.
Oh, man.
And so you kind of say, it doesn't seem to have been worth it.
Amen. And I think that you're right. And I'm not even sure you can completely conclude it didn't affect Lot, because you might recall that when the homosexuals are beating on the door, he doesn't want to give the visitors up, so he offers his daughters. Again, you do what you want with that. But then we get up in the cave after escaping. Mom's dead now. She's a pillar of salt. But we get up in the cave and we've got the two daughters having sex with Dad so that he can have where did they learn that?
Yeah. They
learned it from Daddy, moving them into a political system, becoming influential in a culture, in a context that Daddy should have given more attention to his home life than the politics of sitting in the city gate of Sodom.
Yeah. And so, that doesn't answer the question of should Christians be involved in politics. Obviously, there's a lot more going on with that particular question. But I think that does bring a concern to mind of, I've heard it said that the reason we want Christians to be in politics is because if we don't have Christians in politics, then we're going to have other people, non-Christians, making all of our decisions for us.
Right.
Which is absolutely right. But at the same time, Lot didn't have any influence.
Sure doesn't seem like it.
The New Testament calls him righteous Lot. So apparently Lot's a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
The New Testament doesn't refer to many people that way. And so you kind of say, do you really think you measure up against Lot to this level of that you can change a corrupt political system whenever he couldn't?
Especially if you are in that setting, you're an inside man.
Mm-hmm.
He knows more about what's going on in the city of Sodom than the common Joe on the street knows, because he's sitting in the city gate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that increases your level of responsibility. And I think that, again, you see that process. He pitches his tent towards Sodom. Next thing you know, he's living in Sodom, sitting in the city gate, and he's going to lose his wife. We know his daughters are going to marry two pagans, evidently, that live, and so what's with that? Then they're going to get him dead in the cave and do the perverse. I think Lot, although a righteous man himself, perhaps, I mean, the New Testament, you're right, but I've known a lot of righteous men who were lousy fathers and lousy husbands, and would have done a lot better if they'd have just kept their focus on things that were really important, but instead they watered down their influence, thinking, we can handle this, honey. And they couldn't.
Yeah. And part of the reason that the New Testament even talks about Lot being righteous is because he grieves over the sins of the city.
Good point.
Which I think basically goes to show Lot figured out he wasn't doing any good.
And he recognized the sins of the city.
Yeah, exactly. And
yet he raises his family there.
Yeah, exactly. And so for all of us, I think you kind of say, not just politics in this case,
sure.
but
good point.
The area that we live in, is this really the right place to be? And do we think we're actually having any kind of impact on the place that we're in? If we're not, either we need to start doing something differently, or we probably need to pack up and move somewhere else, because we don't want to be raising our families in that kind of environment.
Amen. My mom and dad will forever be my heroes, because when I was 17 years old, they packed us up and moved us out of a place that was giving itself over to perversion. You go to my hometown today and you find all kinds of horrible drug abuse, etc., etc. My mom and dad moved us out of there halfway across the country because they said, unlike Lot, I don't want my children to grow up in the midst of all of that. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how many parents out there have got enough backbone to do something similar. What would you give up in order to make sure that your children had every chance in the world, not to become a doctor or lawyer or such, but had every chance in the world to become a spiritually mature Christian? Would you move across the country? Would you pull them out of a corrupt public school system? Would you change your occupation from something that forces you into the secular world so much that you have to neglect your children or your wife? I think it's something we really need to make personal application to.
All right, so that's the question of the city gate. Problem number 2 is, why does Lot feel like he needed to ask this guy's permission to marry Ruth to begin with? We already talked about the idea of asking a father's permission, but really what you see here is the idea of redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you can look in the old law and see all kinds of explanations about what this whole thing is about. We're going to go to Jeremiah because...
Yeah, I'm a little surprised Jeremiah's where you're going, but I'm not too, because you're studying it right now. He's preaching through Jeremiah at the little country congregation where he goes.
Yeah, I am. So,
but I figured you'd maybe go to Deuteronomy or someplace else, but I'm anxious to see what you're going to do with this.
Yeah, so what you'll find, basically, if you look back at the old law, is that this idea of redemption was really all about kind of keeping the right things in the right place.
Well said.
And so they talk about land in this passage,
Right.
Right. And that's the kind of Boaz is leading, whatever how he leads into this conversation. As he says, Naomi has this plot of land that belonged to Elimelech, and you need to buy it from her. And then and whenever you buy the land, you're gonna have to marry Ruth.
You get another woman.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where he starts, is with this idea of land.
Right. And that might sound a little bit materialistic to you and I, and maybe it was to a large degree, but we got to remember that they're living in the land that was promised to these people all the way back to Abraham. And I mean, even when, like you say, you go into the law, and there's some pretty strict codes within the law as to what we're going to do to make sure that the land stays within the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to do to make sure that the land doesn't get sold off to the neighboring countries, etc. There's some pretty strict laws about that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so we, I think, don't understand this in a lot of ways because we don't have the same relationship with land.
Correct.
That they did.
Yeah, this is far more than just mom and great grandma's piece of property.
Yeah.
This is a God thing.
Yeah, exactly. So today, whenever you want to buy a piece of land or something along those lines, you just go and buy it.
Right.
Assuming,
If they'll sell it.
Yeah, if they're selling, then you go buy it. Yeah. If they're not, you
shouldn't buy it.
Yeah. I guess you can ask them if they would consider selling, and if they say no, that's where you stop.
You really ought to quit.
Don't do anything.
Don't even give them your sandal.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't have the same relationship to land, right? The land that we live on right now, we've owned for maybe a decade or something like that.
Less than that, probably 7-8 years. I don't know. You know better.
I think we moved in whenever I was 13.
Oh,
so
well, look at you.
I think it'll be 10 years. And
where does the time go?
But yeah, so I mean that. I guess that's a relatively long time, but really it's not, right? We've lived on this land for 10 years, and nobody owned it before us that we knew.
Didn't know.
It's not some kind of sentimental place, really.
No sentiment.
And certainly it's not land that was promised to us by God.
It was not.
And we said, well, I guess I live on that land now because God said so.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he can. God, I guess, has a little bit of a hand in everything. So.
But it's not the promised land.
No, it's not.
No.
And so
it's nice property, but it's not the promised land.
No, it doesn't flow with milk and honey.
And we have no grapes.
No, certainly not. Big enough, we got to get 2 guys to carry a cluster between us.
No, sir.
Yeah. So, the point of these redemptions and that whole thing really seems to be, again, keeping the right people in the right place. Right? That God has essentially ordained, this is your land. And so if you have to sell it or something along those lines, you have to get rid of it. You sell it to somebody who's within the family. You want to keep it within the family. But then at the same time, there's kind of this aspect to it of we don't want to lose it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to sell it to just anybody.
Right.
And that's kind of what you see in this passage in Jeremiah. So this is Jeremiah 32, 6 through 8. It says, Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord came to me. Behold, Hanamel the son of Shallum, your uncle, will come to you and say, buy my field that is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption of thy purchase is yours. Then Hanamel my cousin came to me in the court of the guard, in accordance with the word of the Lord, and said to me, buy my field that is at Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, for the right of possession and redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. Kind of what you see going on here is Jerusalem is under siege by the Babylonians. And so, bad things are going on.
Bad.
Right? That's kind of the idea.
It's not good.
All of this bad stuff is happening, and I think Hanamel wants to get out. Is kind of the idea. And he just wants to, sell off my land and I'm going to run away. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so the person he goes to is his cousin Jeremiah. And he says, you buy this land from me so that it won't just get lost, basically. And the idea is that Jeremiah can almost hold on to this land until I'm ready to buy it back. Or there's some kind of redemption that happens. There would have been, what is it, every 7 years?
Year of Jubilee, I think, yeah.
The year of Jubilee comes around, and then they have to give back the property, basically, and all kinds of things along that line. But kind of the idea is we're going to keep this in the family until it can be returned to me, or later on to my offspring,
right?
Something along those lines. And so basically the idea seems to be, I'm going to sell it to you so that it doesn't go to just anybody.
Yeah.
Because later on, you're going to give it back. Basically, I'm going to let you borrow this field.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, is the idea. And you kind of see the same thing happening in this story. Is with the land and that whole thing. Basically, what's happening is Boaz is saying that the children of Elimelech and Naomi and their sons, that they need to be the people that own this field. But you run into the problem that they don't have any children because they're all either never get born or they died.
Yeah.
All right, and so that's the problem that you run into. And so because of that, Boaz also has the responsibility of going and marrying Ruth and having kids with her, and then at least her firstborn would be considered to be that child that is supposed to inherit the land and all of these things for
Elimelech.
Yes, for Elimelech, yeah. And so you kind of get this idea of all of this is about continuing on the legacy of these families. And again, that's something we don't really have today. That we don't seem to look back on the past in the same way.
Your grandma's coming off the couch right now saying, mention genealogy.
Yeah. We don't care about genealogy as much today.
And I'm sorry, Mom, but you're right. We just don't seem to give you the appreciation. I mean, my mom's got an entire wall, books on there about where we come from. She's figured us all the way back to Adam, I think. But you're right. In our culture today, not only do we not treasure old people, we don't seem to treasure our past.
Yeah, and that is in no way true of Israel.
Right.
Yeah. They are very
genealogy's out the wahoozy.
Yeah, exactly. That's why
Matthew 1.
Yeah. The New Testament starts with genealogy.
Right out the gate.
Yeah, and the reason is because they value this, right?
Right.
They think it's important to know where you came from. And I mean, there's a level of honor to that.
Certainly.
Right? And that really seems to be the idea is either your family is in this position of honor or they're in a position of shame. And you need to know about your lineage so that you know which position you are in.
Yes.
And how you can either maintain the honor or redeem yourself from the shame, right?
My mom, your grandmother, she claims we came from a line that has a pirate in it. Mm-hmm. I always kind of took pride in that. But honestly, if you think about it, we were looters and, had a foul mouth and maybe even a patch over one eye. I don't know. Walked with a limp? Aye, mateys. I don't know. But anyhow, that's in my past. But you're right. If you don't know what's in your past and you don't really know, I come from a good line of people. Mm-hmm. Or, man, I tell you what, we got to work a little harder because we don't come from a great stock of people in the past. You don't have any real purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And so whenever we look at things, we're very individualistic.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Right? And so I can do things, maybe not to that level, but there's an aspect of this that like what I do doesn't reflect back on my ancestors, right? That Grandpa's always going to be a good guy because he was a good guy, and it doesn't really matter what I do.
Yeah.
If I go off and I become a bad person, everybody's going to say, "Oh, that's a shame that he became a bad guy."
Yeah.
And we don't really look back on the family and say, "Oh, clearly
Yeah.
they're a bad family because they produced a bad child," right?
Which to some level is correct.
Yeah.
Because we really have removed responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We, like you say, we so individualized it that we almost say, well, that those parents, they raised a renegade of a person, but we never consider that maybe the parents themselves were really horrible parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of what you see with this whole culture is that they have this idea of, there's something uh, communal about the whole thing,
Mm.
right? That the whole family has this aspect of, each individual member is part of a larger whole.
Yeah.
And so your son can go off and he can be a horrible person, and you say, "Oh, that must be a bad family,"
Right.
right? And it reflects poorly on the entire family, not just on that one individual. And they say, that family has shame brought on them, right? That's the culture that they're in. And so there's all of these aspects essentially lend to this idea that Boaz is trying to help the family of Naomi for whatever reason, partially because it's good on him, right?
Sure.
That if I go and I let this line of my family die out, that that's that's shameful.
Yeah.
All right, and so Boaz, he recognizes that, and he doesn't want to be a shameful person, and so he goes and he fixes the problem.
Right.
Right, and that's kind of what's going on with this whole story. Is Boaz is trying to make sure that good things continue to happen in his particular family.
And again, I bring you back to what if our culture bought into that a little bit more? That
Mhm,
I need to make sure that my cousins are spiritually mature. I need to make sure that the grandchildren understand the will of the Lord. I need to, because it really reflects not just upon the fact that they are good or bad people, but it reflects upon the family line
mhm,
and how things worked out. I think of my Granny Linhart, and phenomenal woman, but honestly, when you look at the folks who came from her, there's a real dichotomy of extremes as to who turned out which way, and those kind of things. But none of us seem to be willing to place the blame on the fact that we didn't care about our family name. We all
mhm,
just, hey, it's my life, I'll do what I want, kind of a thing. So we went off in 100 different directions, never maybe given consideration that to the fact that the Linhart name bears a particular resonance. There's a reputation that goes along with that because of the way I live,
mhm.
good or bad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean that's a broader cultural issue that we're not going to change with one podcast.
Right.
But at the same time, that's an issue with each individual person. Right? Uh, that we are people that all the time are making choices about whether or not we're going to be people that respect our elders. Go into the city gate and ask the wise older gentlemen, do they, uh, you know, do you have any advice for me?
Right.
Uh, we are people that are choosing: am I going to, perpetuate a family line of, honor or shame? Am I going to uh, bring all those things onto my family? And I mean, I think we don't think of it this way, right? We don't think if I become a bad person, I'm going to bring shame onto my family. And yet there is an aspect to it that is still true,
Oh yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
we all know, and we all, I think, kind of think that maybe not of our own family, uh, but you look at somebody else and they have bad kids. You kind of say, oh, they must not be a very good
Yeah.
parent.
Everybody does it.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't think of other people doing it to us. I
Yeah.
think.
You kind of you let yourself off the hook
Yeah.
because not me, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you look at what Paul says to Timothy and Titus with regards to elders, it's interesting how much the family reputation plays into whether or not you can be an elder of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Husband of one wife says more than just that he's a husband of one wife. It says something about the fact that the man was able to maintain a monogamous relationship, that he raised his children. It says, so there's something here that says that elder, if he's really going to be wise, he's going to be an individual who recognizes the reputation of his family. He's going to do everything possible to maintain that, because let's just be honest, how many kids have disqualified their dad from being an elder because of the way they grew up?
Yeah. Yeah, and then we don't do anything about it.
No, we don't. Yeah. Okay.
All right. It's been almost an hour, and we have yet to talk about the sandal.
The sandal. I've been waiting to get to the sandal.
Yeah. So the answer to the whole sandal thing is I don't know. Basically.
Been almost an hour, and we're just going to let it go with I don't know. Well,
yes.
You need to say something.
Mom says amen.
Amen that it's almost been an hour, or amen that we don't know?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Well, surely you got something on the sandal.
Yeah, basically, the thing about the sandal is it's interesting because the story itself kind of indicates that we don't do this anymore, right? Whenever Ruth chapter 4 starts talking about it, it says something along the lines of, in those days they had this custom,
right?
That they would draw off the sandal, which kind of implies they're kind of like, this is archaic. We don't do this anymore.
Back in the day, we used to.
But,
yeah.
So there's kind of this idea of this is like the definition of just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good point.
And the reason it's pointed out, I think, has nothing to do with the sandal itself. And, it's not just the Bible saying, wasn't it cool back in the day whenever we did that sandal thing? We ought to do that more often.
Yeah.
That's not the point. It's rather saying Boaz is making a promise here. And what's interesting is if you read the book of Ruth, you've kind of got bookends of promises. Right? It opens in chapter 1 with this promise that Ruth makes to Naomi, and then it closes in chapter 4 with Boaz making this promise to this random guy, this other redeemer, and saying, I'm going to be the one that is going to take responsibility.
That's a good point.
Ruth.
That's a very good point.
Right? And so you kind of have this.
Your mom said it was neither.
Yeah. She's not going to clarify what it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. The bookends of the promises. I hadn't seen that in the book of Ruth, but that's a good application too there.
Yeah. So Ruth chapter 1 verses 16 and 17 says, "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you.'"
How sweet. Your mom's got a tear in her eye. I'm sure we're not the first couple to ever do it, but those were the vows that Cindy and I said to one another 42 years ago. And look at us. We're still madly in love. I love you, honey. You may continue.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so you have this beautiful promise that Ruth makes to Naomi, and she says basically, "I'm going to take care of you for the rest of both of our lives, right? Even whenever you die, I'm not going to move away. I'm going to live right there until I die, and then I'm going to be buried same plot of land that you're buried on, all right? We're going to be together forever." Which, I mean, it is awesome coming from a daughter-in-law,
definitely,
especially that she's saying to my mother-in-law, I'm going to make sure that you're taken care of.
Yeah.
And so Naomi obviously had a huge impact on Ruth.
Yeah.
But you have this, Mom says she loves you too. But you have this idea of Ruth makes this beautiful promise to her mother-in-law. And then you have a also promise, but it's a little bit less beautiful, with the idea of drawing out the sandal I guess it's kind of cool, uh, but you have this promise that that Boaz makes, which I think is essentially the same promise, right? He doesn't say it in as many flowery words
Yeah.
as Ruth says to Naomi, but he makes the same promise essentially of I am going to make sure that you are taken care of for as long as I live or you live, right? And for the rest of my life, I'm going to make sure
Yeah.
that all of these things may happen. And he's making this promise not to her, but he's making the promise nonetheless.
Sure.
Right? And that's kind of the idea of what's going on here.
Definitely. Yeah. And whether it's to her directly or not, it certainly is about her. And it is a promise to her because that's what the legal system would do.
Mm-hmm.
Is they would, I mean, this is, and you're probably going to go here, but this is essentially the signing of the contract in our day and age.
Yeah.
There was a time, you hear the old timers say, there was a time when a handshake meant everything. You could trust a guy because he shook your hand, that kind of a thing. Well, we don't have that anymore. That's why we got so many lawyers running around and all that kind of suing everybody, etc. So we've got to have a contract.
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, it didn't depend upon a handshake. It depended upon a sandal swap.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is essentially what marriage is all about anyway, is this promise.
Yes.
And I mean, that's what's going on here.
Sure.
Right? Is Boaz may not be making this promise to Ruth or even in Ruth's presence, but he's making this promise. And so you can kind of conclude that this really is the wedding ceremony. It's a little bit odd as a wedding ceremony, but that's kind of the idea. That there's not really clarified after this. Do they throw a party and they
Right.
actually have a wedding? What happens? I don't know. Maybe they did, but this is really the important climactic moment. Is
Yeah.
Boaz says, "Yes, I am going to take care of you." And he says his wedding vows right there
Right.
to this other redeemer, and says, "You were not willing to make this promise, but I am."
Yeah.
And so I will. I'll go ahead and do this.
And in our culture, we've got, it doesn't seem to mean a whole lot to a lot of folks, but in our culture, that's why we have the wedding ceremony in front of a bunch of witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've done many weddings, but generally, I don't know if they still have it now, but it's been a while since I've done a wedding. But you even have to have your best man and your best woman, whatever she's called, sign the thing. We witnessed that they did say this, and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. I think that this is the legal side of things. That who knows where it went, but when you read the last part of the book of Ruth, and it talks about Naomi and how they're so thankful that things have turned her way again. And the last chapter, the last part of the book of Ruth really talks about whether or not Naomi will be able to hold her grandchildren on her lap and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It really is about the future, all of which happens because of this commitment that Boaz is willing to make in the city gate.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a professor tell me one time, well, not me particularly, but our class. But we were talking about marriage and that kind of thing. And he was talking about this idea that if you are a witness at a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically just the guest, but
Yeah.
you go to a wedding and you witness that marriage, that puts you under kind of this
Good point.
This,
Responsibility.
yeah, to make sure that couple stays together.
Yeah.
And say,
Powerful point.
we are people that have witnessed this union. We approved of it, and so now part of that responsibility is on me. Right? It's not just on you guys to hold yourselves together, but it's also on us to say, I approved of this, and so now I'm going to go and I'm going to see, do you need any help with anything? And we're going to make sure that this thing works.
That's a good point.
And so maybe we should attend less weddings.
Well, that, or consider when you go that it's going to be your responsibility to step up.
Yeah, and whenever you get married, for any of those that are not married that are watching this, I think that kind of says you have a responsibility whenever you choose. You're picking out the guest list.
Oh, that's good.
People
that's good.
that are going to do that.
Yeah, going to hold you responsible, hold you accountable.
Yeah, exactly. They take their responsibility of being a witness to your marriage seriously.
Yeah.
And you want to pick those people to be guests at your wedding.
Yeah, that's excellent. I don't know that this has anything to do with it because it's a phrase that comes much later. But yeah, the idea that you need to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, kind of thing. I've always kind of associated that with this idea of exchanging the sandals because that regardless if they did wear the same size or not, it's a different shoe on your foot now. And as you walk away from the setting, there is a reminder that's going to be there for several days at least that, wow, something happened and I need to remember that commitment that was made.
Do you think they had shoemakers in this time that specifically for this purpose, that whenever they traded sandals, you could go to them and they'd be like, "Hey, we're gonna resize this."
Do you care to? And by the way, I need my other one to match.
Yeah,
I don't know. They may not have had
they
a big
only had
pride thing going on, but
one kind of sandal.
maybe they did. But you got to think that they probably had more than one, and this guy's walking around with, which might even play into the
He
story.
made a deal yesterday.
He died, but that might play into this. It's obvious when you look at his feet. Oh, you just made some kind of deal.
Yeah.
So there's that level of accountability that might have played in. Wow, son, we have gone an hour and a bunch.
Yeah, I'm not done yet.
Okay, I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
Okay. So we have this idea of these promises in Ruth, and that's the bookends. And what's interesting is I think that kind of is a microcosm of the entire story of the Bible. Right? Is that really the Bible is about God making promises to his people, and then God fulfilling those promises.
Wow.
All right. So Jeremiah again, because I'm in Jeremiah. So Jeremiah 33 verses 17 through 22. I have to give a presentation on this passage tomorrow, so it was on my brain. It says, "For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel, and the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings, and to make sacrifices forever." The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. "Thus says the Lord, if you can break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that the day and night will not come at their appointed time, then also my covenant with David, my servant, may be broken, so that he shall not have a son to reign on his throne, and my covenant with the Levitical priests, my ministers. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered and the sands of the sea cannot be measured, so I will multiply the offspring of David, my servant, and the Levitical priests who minister to me."
Wow.
So kind of what you see, I think, is Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of this, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is both this son of David that sits on the throne of Israel, and he's not a Levitical priest, but he is a priest, right? He's the king and a priest both. And so you have this idea that Jesus is the one that fulfills both of these promises. And I just think that idea that God puts forward of, if you can break my covenant with the day and the night, that
which
they
you
stop,
can't.
right? You can, if you can make the sun stop shining, then you can break these covenants that I have made with David. And point being, obviously, you can't do it, right? God has made this promise, and so that promise is going to be fulfilled.
Wow.
Regardless of what happens, it's going to happen. And so take that with regards to the promises that God makes to us, right? God always keeps his promises.
Always.
And so if God promises us that I'll never leave you or forsake you, if he promises us salvation and eternity in heaven with him, then we can know that God is going to keep those promises as well.
Wow.
Right? Those promises are just as unshakable as God's promises with David and the tribe of Levi, and night and day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
God always keeps his promises.
That's good. That's really good. Powerful stuff, my friend.
Thank you. Don't forget to keep in touch with us.
And our sneakers.
You can find us on Instagram at RestorationCast, or visit our website, which you can find here, or RestorationSchoolofBiblicalStudies.com. And also, if you search up RestorationCast on Spotify, we have every episode that we've ever done is backdated on there, so you can find them all there. So
They call me Vanna.
yeah. So anyway, we will talk to you again next week.
And keep your sandal unless you're making a deal.
Yeah. Goodbye.